Hello everyone, and welcome back to another GIS lecture video. And in today's lecture video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this idea of spatial data. Up to this point, we've talked about how we can get locations with GPS. We've talked about how we can record that location in 3 dimensions with the geographic coordinate systems, latitude, longitude. And we've talked about how we can take those 3-dimensional coordinate systems and smash them down into 2 dimensions using projected coordinate systems, right? Converting from latitude and longitude to X and Y. But up to this point, we haven't really talked about the biggest piece yet. And that's how we actually take this concept of location, tie it with things that we care about to create actual spatial data. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on in this lecture series. So generally speaking, spatial data will consist of 2 pieces. Right? The spatial part and then the non-spatial part. So to be clear, not every single spatial data set is going to have a non-spatial part, but generally speaking, we're going to be dealing with non-spatial data in a spatial way. We're going to connect this non-spatial stuff. So this could be, for example, if we're concerned about fire hydrants, right? The spatial part would be the location, right? So spatial is almost always location. Right, but this non-spatial part, right, for example, if we're talking about fire hydrants, right, it could be maybe the color of the fire hydrant because different colors signify different uses, right, or different municipalities, right? It could be maybe the pressure that comes out of the fire hydrant because maybe you need to know whether or not it's a high pressure hydrant or a lower pressure hydrant, right? So non-spatial data is going to be the things that maybe we want to know about that location that aren't spatial in and of themselves. And these are going to usually take the form of attributes. Right, these are going to take the form of attributes. You can think of these as just data, right? Information about the location. So what we're going to talk about in this video, we're going to break this series up into pieces. The first part we're going to focus on is talking about spatial data. In specific, we're going to talk about the 2 different types of spatial data. There are what's called discrete spatial data, and then there's what's called continuous spatial data. We'll define and compare both of those and talk about how they fit into spatial data through different data models. So for discrete data, we're going to be talking primarily about vector data. And it's not a big deal if these terms don't make sense yet, because we're going to go into each of these in more detail in turn in future videos. And we're going to talk about how vector data is structured into points, lines, and polygons. And then we're going to talk about continuous data, and the data model that's used most often there is going to be something called raster data. And we're going to spend a fair amount of time comparing and contrasting these 2 data types. Then we're going to talk about the non-spatial data. We're going to talk about this concept of an attribute table. Which is really the way that vector data, primarily vector data, stores non-spatial data. And then we're going to talk about categories of non-spatial data. categories of non-spatial data. So this is going to be what different types of numbers there are, right? So this is, in other words, it's going to be called types of data. And in specific, we're going to talk about the four most common categories, which are nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. And being able to understand, to be able to look at a set of data, figure out which one of these categories it belongs to, and be able to effectively determine whether or not that category of data will work for a given application, because there's going to be different limitations to whether or not you're nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. So understanding those limitations is going to be a big part of that portion of the lecture. So hopefully this all made sense. Again, this is just a roadmap for what we're going to talk about in future videos. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.